He's consulting with Tories far and wide. Good morning, Matthew. Is Jeremy Corbyn losing it?
Good morning, Hugh. Well, he does seem to be. The pressure is really getting to him. And that's one of the things about Corbyn. When he's put under a bit of pressure by an interviewer, he does tend to crack. He does tend to become quite shouty rather than keeping his cool. So I think we're starting to see him cracking. Obviously, Boris has opened up a little bit more of a poll lead. I'd say an average of sort of 12 points now. So, yes, will Corbyn keep it together? That's the big question this week.
Becoming irritable with a questioner on Channel 4 is not a good look. What is Channel 4? Explain that to our audience.
So Channel 4 is, and Channel 4 News in particular, that clip was taken from, is the most left-wing broadcast show in the UK. And it's one which most Conservatives refuse to appear on out of principle because they become so left-wing and so biased. So the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was on there, it is sort of home territory for him. But the fact that he got annoyed with them shows how far out he is, how way out he is from the mainstream.
Now, Matthew Elliott, Nick Timothy is a columnist for The Telegraph, and a very good columnist for The Telegraph. He wrote a story as Boris redraws the political map. He's changing the Conservative Party in ways that are profound and lasting. But is he peaking too early, Matthew Elliott? That's what I worry about with campaigns. It just seems like everything's going his way.
Well, things are going his way, but crucially, there's no sense of complacency at the moment. And I certainly don't think there will be, because they realise that actually it's not a traditional swing. Usually when it comes to an election and you have, broadly two parties and one party so far ahead, you can quite easily work out which seats they'll pick up based on a uniform swing. But of course, there's no uniform swing this time round, because most parts of the country are now essentially four-party races or five-party races if you look at Scotland and Wales, where they have their own nationalist parties. So it's much more difficult to work out on a constituency-by-constituency basis what will happen. And of course, there's still 2.5, 3 weeks to go in the campaign, and a lot could happen. So tomorrow we've got the first head-to-head debate between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. If the electorate starts seeing the election through the prism of two-party politics, you may start seeing some of the Liberal Democrat voters and Green Party voters starting to coalesce around Labour again, boosting them in the polls. So there's no sense of complacency. A lead's a lead, which is great, but I certainly don't think they're peaking too early.
No, I read yesterday an Oxford Dawn talking about the fact that the election has become a binary election. It's Boris Johnson and Brexit, or Jeremy Corbyn, a hung parliament, and no Brexit. And do you agree with that assessment? It's binary now?
I do, and actually that message is getting through very, very clearly. People have had, of course, since the referendum, 3.5 years of what seemed like increasing drift, and certainly drift under the latter part of Theresa May's administration. And that's brought a lot of frustration. People can't understand why 3.5 years after the Brexit referendum, why we still haven't left. So people are now looking forward to next year and seeing that clear choice. So you can actually end the uncertainty by electing Boris and you get the deal over the line on the 31st of January. Or the other alternative, because Jeremy Corbyn can't win a majority, is another hung parliament. And people are sick and tired of the sclerosis of politics. They want to move on to something more decisive and clear.
Is that possible to work even north of the border between England and Scotland? I know the Scottish National Party is expected to pick up a bunch of seats that the Tories won the last go-around. Do you think the SNP, that even Scottish voters want the Brexit thing? They can come back to independence in 5 years. Is there a chance there?
Well, let's just focus on the 13 Conservative seats in Scotland they're defending. What I'm hearing on the ground is that actually the message is starting to resonate there, that if they allow the SNP to take their seats, that would mean another referendum on Scottish independence and also an end to Brexit. And there are lots of Brexiteers in Scotland. It's actually concentrated in those Conservative seats. And of course, those Conservative seats are very strongly unionist. They support the UK and they don't want to have a second referendum. So I actually think that the Conservatives will keep far more of those seats than is commonly thought. There was some talk at the beginning they could be reduced down to one seat in Scotland. I don't see that happening.
All right, now the column I quoted to you earlier, I want to read from Nick Timothy. Quote, "The Prime Minister has already converted the Tories into a resolutely pro-Brexit party. Every Conservative candidate in this election supports his plan for getting Britain out of the European Union. The rebels he expelled from the party have either accepted his deal and returned to the fold or been forced into permanent exile. The likes of Dominic Grieve, now an independent candidate, will discover the true extent of their personal vote when they lose to their conservative opponents." Do you agree, Matthew Elliott?
I do very much so. There's very little support for independent candidates in the UK, even if you've been an MP for many, many years. Because we don't have the primary system in the UK that you have in the US, I would say there's much less of a following for individual MPs. Because, of course, individual MPs, once they're in Parliament, have to, by and large, vote along party lines, and it's much more a party-based system rather than individual candidates. So you have less of a following in the UK than you do in the US. So I think he's absolutely right. The likes of Dominic Grieve, David Gauke is another former cabinet minister who is standing as independent. They will see very, very little support locally.
Now, I noticed that since the last time we talked, Labour came out with this insane broadband policy. Nationalize everything. Does that doom them? I think everybody likes their internet, don't they? They don't want it to go the way of the nationalized industries post-World War II that completely collapsed.
Well, I'd say that people have very little concept, by and large, of what it was like, before Thatcher. People's memories aren't that long. So, actually, when you talk about, for example, nationalising the railways, that's still quite a popular policy because people are generally speaking unhappy with some of the railway lines at the moment. But then when you talk about nationalising broadband, I'm sure Labour thought they were onto a winner, saying free broadband for all. But actually, it hasn't gone down as well as they might have thought. And I think that's because people just have in the back of their minds the idea of, government, big IT projects, how they've gone wrong in the past, the whole idea of, Big Brother and, the government somehow being able to look at your data and things like that. So all of these different issues have actually raised huge red flags with people. And people are sort of thinking, what's the catch here? So it hasn't quite caught on the way they hoped. Now, later on this week, Labour will be coming out with their manifesto. It will have other things in there, like, for example, they're going to trial a universal basic income in parts of the country. Let's see how that goes down. Now, there certainly are voters who will vote along more domestic issues rather than Brexit-related issues, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes down.
All right, I also want to talk quickly. The Tories are walking away from cutting the corporate level from 19% to 17%. Boris saying, nope, that money's going into the NHS. That seems to me to be populist and smart. What do you think of it, Matthew Elliott?
Well, our corporation tax in the UK is already pretty low when you look across both across the world and across other European countries. So I can see how further cuts in corporation tax aren't a top priority. What I think he will do instead, though, for business, and this is crucially important after Brexit, because he wants to make Britain the most sort of business-friendly place to do business across the EU or Europe. He will look at other areas like regulation, other taxes that affect businesses like business rates. So there will be a good business package. In fact, he's speaking at the CBI this morning, which is the big business group in the UK, a bit like the Chamber of Commerce in the US. And he stressed how he wants to make Britain a business-friendly place. So generally speaking, I'm quite comfortable with his stance on corporation tax. And I also think it's smart to really doubly underline the fact that the NHS is very much safe and will prosper in Tory hands.
Last question. Jeremy Corbyn was speaking today. There's an old saying, for the many, not for the few. And an audience member stood up and said, is Labour for the many but not for the Jew? That is just devastating, Matthew Elliott. And I don't think they can get the stink of anti-Semitism off of Labour.
I think you're right. I mean, who would have thought it in 2019 we'd be talking about a major political party in the UK, indeed in the world, having these views at the very heart of it. And when people come and write about the general election, if Labour come and lose, one of the key reasons why the shine was taken off Jeremy Corbyn and after the 2017 election will be down to the anti-Semitism and what's resulted from that. And after Jeremy Corbyn, if he's forced to resign, which I think he would be, I think a key point for the new leader will be to really expel anybody with these repellent views from the party.
But they really need to purge their party, don't they?
Very much so. And it can't be a cosmetic job. They've tried that in the past. They've tried to have these little reviews and basically swept the issue under the carpet. It really needs to be a full clear out of people with those views.
Matthew Elliott, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Matthew_Elliott, 2 L's, 2 T's. Follow him at Brexit Central. Follow me. He'll be back twice a week until the big vote on 12/12. Important for the West, important for freedom everywhere that Boris Johnson wins. He's got the momentum. We'll keep